I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And this is where every weekday at noon Eastern, I bring to you a short conversation with an expert or a thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. Now, yesterday I had a live conversation with Amar Rafat, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at Wendover Construction. And we talked about industrialized construction. Great conversation about everything from BIM and reality capture all the way through site superintendents and the impact of industrialized construction on the future of our built environment. And so what I thought I would do today is bring back someone that turns out to be a friend of Amar's, Amy Marks. She is the Queen of Prefab. Several weeks ago, we had a fantastic conversation about prefab, about industrialized conversation. So I wanted to bring Amy back, the recorded conversation with Amy back, to bookend that conversation with Amar, because I think these two conversations combined give us a really good view of how industrialized construction is changing the way we think about designing, developing, and building the built environment. So enjoy this conversation with Amy Marks, the Queen of Prefab. Hey, welcome back to Shorts. We've never met before. My name is Jeff Echols. I am a senior advisor and the head of marketing for Shadow Partners. And the whole reason for Shadow Shorts, the purpose here, what we do here is to bring you a conversation every weekday with an expert or a thought leader in the realm of innovation for the built environment. So every weekday at noon, I bring you a different conversation. And today's conversation is going to be a lot of fun. You may actually recognize my guest today. She has a great personal brand. She's got a lot of followers, a lot of viewers out there on YouTube. Amy Marks is the Queen of Prefab. So Amy, thank you for joining me today. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here. So what we put on this as a title is a convergence of AEC and M. And I think most people out there understand what we're talking about, but we're talking about architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing. And before we went live, we were talking about the fact that industrialized construction, which is sort of the umbrella, I guess, for the convergence of AEC and M, that's one of the most popular topics of conversation or biggest themes for the questions that we get at Shadow Partners. So when you suggested this as a title, the convergence, AEC and M, why that as a title? Why do you focus on that as what you do?
Well, I think, we're seeing industries completely change because, processes have converged, technology has converged.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really what you're seeing because of this convergence of manufacturing and AEC is really business models are changing. So I think that's the important thing to note, that business models are changing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so I teach pro practice in architecture school at the undergrad and the grad level. And that's one of the things I hit on all the time. Right? We've got a lot of students that come in and they think about the traditional architecture firm model. It's a 100-year-old model.
Right.
And my first question is, what around you hasn't changed in your lifetime, right? These are 25-year-olds, right?
Right.
And the answer to that is nothing. Everything has changed in the course of their lifetime. So why is this business model the one that we continue to follow? Why hasn't it changed? And so I like what you're talking about there. Business models need to change, right, in order to stay relevant. So in your experience and in your focus, right, the Queen of Prefab, I know there's a lot more to it than just prefab, but as you're focusing on this, what are some of the things that aren't talked about enough?
I think really, what you just said, in some ways, we're still teaching architecture and engineering the same way we did 100 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that expected experience. Look, I get up on stage and talk about the fact that you can order a pizza today with more technology, watch it arrive at your door from your Apple Watch. And on a job site, we're calling somebody still to call somebody to see if our $500,000 piece of equipment is going to show up. And,
Right.
It's really relevant in the sense that, 30 to 40%, depending on what research you look at, is the landfills are filled with construction waste. And that's not because constructors are doing that inefficiently or building product manufacturers. That's because we have assumption-based design being taught at the architecture level, you're talking about placeholder data. You're not talking about real ways that things are actually made, because that would just be, we're very disconnected as an ecosystem. And you can't expect architects to know how every single assembly is made and all their adjacencies, and then multiply that by the number of proprietary systems that are out there and expect them to be designing things with real data, right? And because the data has been disconnected and we don't have, look, we're $14 trillion worth of an environment not connected by e-commerce, not connected by real data. You don't have people looking in their design tool, clicking to search content in real time like I do on my iPhone all day for Amazon when I want to buy something. And I think, again, like the expectation is that people are paid on some wasteful practices and business models these days. So I think it's not about couldn't we change and don't we have the technology? It's, are you willing to change your business model to get paid on value instead of waste?
Yeah, yeah. So what's the first step in changing?
Recognizing that you are dissatisfied with the current state. I would say nobody changes unless they're unhappy with the current state or they have aspirations that they're not able to reach. So I think after that, once you realize that you're unhappy in some way, or then you need to actually have a vision of what is possible. And you need to know what your company wants to be when it grows up, how it's going to make money, what's important to you. Sustainability is obviously important to me. And then after you understand a vision of what you want to be when you grow up, here's where most companies fall down. Then you have to pick one or two first concrete steps of action to get there and meet you where you are today and map that out so that, look, all of that has to be greater than overcoming resistance. There's a formula called Dan Miller's formula for change. That's what I've actually just read out to you. What most people don't realize is the resistance doesn't come from external parties. It comes internally from your own corporation and from your own people. But I think if I really had to say where it falls down is most people don't think about the simple things they could do today and meet their company where they are today and get them on the path to do something for change. So, and by the way, that something is very different depending on if you're an architecture firm or a specialty subcontractor or a general contractor or a big owner, or if you're a building product manufacturer. And I think, look, at the end of the day, we need, informed design with the manufacturing detail, the sustainability detail. And you're expecting to have informed design without connected information. And I think that's difficult right now for people.
Yeah, that's really interesting to think about it that way, because having a couple of decades or more experience working in the A's and the A's and the E's,
Right.
In a past life, I know the education, I know the experience, and I completely understand that disconnect that you're talking about. And it seems to me that there's a layer that we need to bring in, the layer of how do we plug these things together? How do we have that connectedness? So if I'm, it would be a much, much, much longer conversation to say we're going to go all the way back to academia and start rebuilding it from there, which may be part of the solution. But if I'm a leader of, let's say, a construction firm, a large construction firm that's going, okay, we've been banging 2x4s together for 85 years as a company, but we understand things are changing. We've got to work to remain relevant. So what does industrialized construction mean to me? How do we, we're beyond okay, we need to change.
Right.
I know we need to change. How do we start to change as our ABC construction firm of, we're a $100 million construction firm. How do we begin to change and work industrialized construction into our mix?
By the way, I have to make this comment only because you work in the A side, that you're like, how do the contractors change to make this possible? Like, just we went right past design, and like, how do you build something using manufacturing techniques that I've just made a dumb box out of, and how do you make it a real thing that can actually get built? So that's not lost on me that somebody who teaches on the A side is like, how do the contractors fix this? Of having been
let's address that too. Yeah, let's address that too. It's a great point.
So let's start from the question you asked, and then we'll go back into the AE side. So yes, I mean, look, you have a lot of contractors. The make information of how we build things, let's face facts, it comes from the specialty subcontractors at this point. The make data is in the MEP, F, structure contractors, all the guys that have where the money is in their fabrication facilities. those guys have the majority of the make information, plus the building product manufacturers, obviously, from the windows to the generators to whatever has been productized and now manufactured like product. So if you're a general contractor and you truly want to start understanding the data around that make information, look, you've got general contractors right now putting tremendous amounts of money in the content of the models they're creating, not because it's a contract model, not because they have to create the model for like their own purposes. They're creating those models because they have lack of labor, skilled labor out in these places, and they've got to figure out how to do more with less. Right. So what they're trying to accomplish is, how do I do more with less so that I can understand the rules of some of this automated equipment that I can either bring out onto the job site, whether it's Canvas or, Hilti's equipment or roll formers from Howick and, those kinds of guys. They're trying to figure that out because they have less people there. And the larger the assemblies they can bring in from offsite, the less they have to manage, right? And the more time they can spend on the complicated bespoke parts, right? So I think the contractors are figuring out, and then they're also trying to figure out, how do I reuse that data so that it can figure out how to inform the designers who have no idea about how some of these things actually are manufactured, so that later when I'm now in charge of a design build program or an IPD project, or I have some influence, that they can take more of that make data and reuse it so that the architects just don't use generative AI to move pretty spaces around in coarse grained detail of the actual building. But what if you could actually use that same visualization with real things down to the fastener, I always say fastener level detail, or the pipe insertion detail. You would want that, if you could, to know what beautiful thing you just designed could actually be actualized the way you saw it. Because right now you're visualizing things that you hope can be made the way you visualize them. And by the way, that's true of lots of designers. That's true of car designers. That's true of building designers. That's true of anyone that's using, coarse grained movie makers, anyone that's using coarse grained detail to visualize. Their hope is that we shouldn't live on hope. We should live on the certainty of the data, that we can start using generative AI, that you can actually get what you envision and get paid for that instead of drawing things that will never be built, right? Like, that's factual.
Yeah. Yeah, those are good points, and I think it's the design side. The designers, again, cars, movies, architecture, whatever. They're getting a little bit of heartburn when you're saying that, because there's this, oh, but my creativity, right? But then the business side of it, right? The business model side of it.
Let me ask you: do you love drawing fire stairs? Do you love
no, they don't.
Okay. Do you love drawing interstitial spaces? Do you love drawing racks and risers and behind the wall, above the ceiling, under the dirt stuff?
No,
Guess what?
Don't.
You could actually be freed up to draw the beautiful entries and stairways and openings if you didn't have to draw fire stairs, because that was a manufactured product that you were able to insert in your generative AI that could be made, so that you could spend more time, my friends, in architecture on the stuff we want you to spend more time on.
Exactly.
That's the mindset shift you have to make. Stop drawing fire stairs.
That is exactly right. Toilet partitions and the whole bit. Exactly. That's I was interviewing a while back, a year ago, maybe, Eitan Safardi, one of the founders of SWAP, SWAPP, and he said basically the same thing, right? If you're scared of this technology, think of it like this: what did you love when you were in school? Right. It was the design. It was these pieces, the ones that you're talking about.
Right.
All of these tools, all this technology frees you up to concentrate on the things that you do best. And I think he said it, you said it. I think that's the perfect argument.
Right. And by the way, you also get to save the world. Ready? You don't design something that has to be cut or welded in a different way because it wasn't the most efficient way to do it. 30 to 40% are in our landfills because you are being asked to design things without really knowing the efficiencies of manufacturing. So, look, you get to focus on the stuff you want to do, and you get to save the world as architects and design beautiful buildings. What more could you want from industrialized construction? Really, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And so, when we think about, and I think this is, for this conversation, because of the way I set it up, we separated it out for a minute, right? We separated construction and design out, but I think what really is necessary is to bring it back together, right? It's got to be some sort of
Right.
holistic, collaborative relationship. We can get into product of design and we can get into delivery and things like that. But I think that's the way that things have to move forward. So in your work and what you're concentrating on, what's the day-to-day look like? I mean, what are you, when you're talking to whoever it is, a contractor, an engineer, an architect, you're speaking from stage, whatever version of your day you want to envision, what's the big message, the big takeaway? I mean, we've hit on a lot of them, but what is the big takeaway that everybody that's listening to this needs to grasp as we move towards the end of 2023?
I would say, the same expected experience you live in your life, your day to day life, not your work life, where technology makes things easier and frees you up to do the things you want to spend your time on. What if you could apply those same technologies that exist today to the work in which you are doing? So it would free you up to do the things in your business that you really enjoy doing and make money at those things. How are we going to look at what's going on with, generative AI and with what's going on with, all these platforms that are enabling data to be used in a different way and cross industry data, right? So, like, what would you be able to accomplish if you embraced some of that technology that exists and that you use every day, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really great way to put it. I mean, you held up your iPhone a few minutes ago. You talked about Amazon, and, back to what I asked my students, what hasn't changed? If these students are 25 years old, which to most of us is, it's kind of hard to remember when we were 25 years old. But if that's about their age, you think about their experience and their expectation. And
Absolutely.
why are we not bringing that into our professional work? So I think that's
You
a
want to you want to
really
ask?
great point.
Here's a perfect example. Sorry to interrupt you, Jeff. Here's a
No, go ahead.
perfect example because I know we're running out of time.
Yep.
I asked a gentleman that was at a big manufacturing firm who ran their IT. He happened to be there for a very long time. I said, "What keeps you up at night?" Now he runs all their technology at this big manufacturing firm. He said, "What keeps me up at night is the 29 different kinds of software that I have." Sorry, that's my doodle. He's all excited now. The 29 different kinds of software that I have and all the updates to make sure one of them talks to one another. And I said, wow, of all the things you could spend your time on, I'm like, this is my iPhone. It's updating apps all the time so that they speak to one another, so that when I go to the restaurant tonight and use 14 different apps to get there, understand what I'm wearing and ordering and do, I never think like, is that updated or not? And are they speaking to one another? Platforms resolve themselves in the conversation that he was having with me. And I was like, you should probably know that someone else is going to solve for that and think about some other problem, right? Like,
Yeah.
I would never think in a platform environment that would be the problem I'm personally as an end user trying to solve, right? Like, we have to have the same expected experience that I would have on any other platform in my life.
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic example, and it's so true. So true. If you're watching this or listening to this right now and you go, hey, I need more of this. One thing I would say is go to queenofprefab.com. The URL is in the bottom left corner right now. That's Amy's website. And you have I don't even know what the number is anymore, but you've got a lot of followers on YouTube as well. It's called Queen of Prefab. That's your channel on YouTube as well, right?
Yep. You can pretty much Google Queen of Prefab and find me
All
for
right.
sure.
Google Queen of Prefab. Find more. Amy speaks from the stage. She's got her website there where you can find out other offerings that she has. Go over to YouTube, look up Queen of Prefab, and learn more about industrialized construction. And that's a great segue because Amy and I were talking about this before we went live. Shadow Summit. I'm just going to hint at some things. One of the things that I've talked about that's going to happen at Shadow Summit this year are conversations about a lot of the topics that we've touched on today: generative AI, industrialized construction, etc. The reason we call it a summit, and this is the 7th annual Shadow Summit, it'll be in October 24th through 26th in Atlanta. The reason we call it a summit is because it's not a conference that you go to get your learning units. It is a place that you go to connect with other executives, to have conversations that will set the agenda for the built environment as we look at 2024 and beyond. The history of Shadow Summit is that we've set the agenda for electric vehicles, discussions around electric vehicles, around AI. What's it going to be this year? You get to show up. You get to be a part of that determination, and have an effect on what the A's, the E's, the C's, the CREs are paying attention to and concentrating on in terms of the built environment, how we design, how we build, how we develop in 2024. So shadowsummit.com is where you can find more info on that. Those tickets are going quickly. It is a purposefully intimate affair. There are only 200 tickets available. I don't know off the top of my head how many are still left. There are less than 200, a lot less than 200 left. So there's an apply button on the page, towards the top of the page there at shadowsummit.com. Hit that button, apply to attend, join us for this conversation, and maybe you happen to run into Amy at Shadow Summit this year. We'll see what happens. So with that, Amy, thanks so much for this conversation. It's a great one. It's an important one. I really appreciate the perspective that you've given us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely a blast to have you here. And for those of you out there, thanks for listening, watching, whether live or in some time-shifted manner. I will be back Monday. Today's Friday as we record this or as we broadcast this. So I'll be back Monday, noon Eastern, with another Shadow Short, another expert or thought leader from the realm of innovation for the built environment. Until then, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon.